What's up, everybody? Ransom Reviews back. Can already hear the depression in my voice. Woke up this morning, worst case scenario. Gordon Hayward has left the Celtics for nothing. So I wanted to talk about the NBA draft, how it went for the Celtics, and also how the offseason has gone for the Celtics so far. A little bit of doom and gloom. Hope you're ready for it. Let's get started. So first, the NBA draft. I know a lot of people were expecting some sort of big move, some sort of fireworks, possibly Danny Ainge working a trade. I know he was very interested in trading the 3 picks in the first round up for a higher pick that he could then flip to a veteran. Drew Holiday was in the mix. That obviously fell through. A couple of other names had been floated around. Nothing came of it. We even heard rumors of a Kemba Walker to Chicago deal. Nothing came of it. What I was hoping was that Danny would find a way to possibly package picks 26 and 30 and move back up into that teen range, because I thought there was a lot of value in the players selected in that range. Obviously, that wasn't able to happen either. So what were we left with? We were left with the situation that nobody wanted, that Danny didn't want, that I was actually kind of okay with, depending on the players taken, where Danny just had to use all of his draft picks. The first selection was Aaron Nesmith from Vanderbilt, a selection that I actually really like, despite the chatter around this pick not being – doesn't seem like many people like this pick. And so now I'm starting to sort of reconsider how excited I was about it. But Aaron Nesmith was a guy who shot like 50% from 3 in his sophomore season at Vanderbilt last year. But then again, it was a shortened season because of injury. He only played 14 games and had a stress fracture in his foot, which is a bad injury for a basketball player. And the year before that, as a freshman, he only shot like 34%. So, his number one ability is shooting threes. And I guess you could look at that and say, well, we don't really know that he's that good of a shooter. I've watched some game film on him, and I think his shot is absolutely beautiful. I think he's got a guy that has really good intangibles, work ethic, leadership qualities. Vanderbilt was much better with him than they were without him. He has a great NBA body, 6'6", 220 pounds about. He hasn't really shown the ability to play effective defense, but I think the potential is there. And yeah, I mean, I really like this pick. And I think he could be, I think he could come on to the Celtics and be one of our best shooters right away, especially if he's coming off the bench. But, a lot of people are just saying limited upside. Well, we'll see. You just never know with these things, We drafted Jaylen Brown, and he couldn't shoot. And now he can shoot, and now he's a great player. We drafted Jason Tatum, who didn't play defense, and now he plays defense, and he's a great player. So, so much of these draft picks and what they end up being is just filled with uncertainty, and I think you need to address that. So while I'm excited about the pick, who knows? Could go anyway. And anybody who tells you one thing or the other as a certainty is just BSing you. They don't know what they're talking about. Even the GMs don't know what they're doing. The second pick the Celtics had at 26, we took Peyton Pritchard. This was a pick I was not less than excited about, I guess is how you would say it. I thought there was a lot better value left on the board. Pritchard reminds me a lot of like Jimmer Fredette. He's just like this undersized white dude with limited athleticism who played 4 years, was a great player at Oregon, could shoot, could compete, very high level competitor. But I don't know what his role is going to be in the NBA, what his ceiling is. I mean, like, honestly, it feels like best case scenario, he's a backup point guard. That is best case. And I get it. Like, it's pick 26, but I felt like with our first pick with Nesmith, we took a guy who maybe doesn't have the highest ceiling, but should be able to contribute almost right away in a perfect world. So I was just thinking once we got to 26 and 30, maybe it makes more sense to take some picks on players, take some swings on guys who might have some high potential, but might never pan out. And I feel like Pritchard was the exact opposite of that. He's a guy who can probably come in and maybe do some things right away, but if he's going to develop anything from there is doubtful. Just the athletic, like there's real concerns on whether or not he's going to be able to defend anybody on the NBA level, or whether or not he can even get his shot off, which is the one good thing he has going for him. He has like that Steph Curry kind of range at times, but I just don't know if it's going to translate to the NBA. Then at pick 30, we took Desmond Bane, which is actually a guy I was really excited about. I was like, okay, great. Another great pick. Like this is a guy, a 3-and-D guy who actually could really possibly help us. So then what does Danny do? Immediately flips him for like a future second round pick possible, plus a bag of chips, whatever pile of crap and odds and ends. And I get it. At the time when he was drafting, we didn't have the roster space to keep all these dudes. But like, a few days later, we accept Semi Ojeley's team option. So, to keep Semi Ojeley on this team, who is just going to do nothing, and then to flip Desmond Bane, who could have a lot of potential, to Memphis for literally nothing because we don't have the roster space, does not make sense to me. And if I watch him blowing up at Memphis next year, I'm like really close to becoming a Dallas Mavericks fan, on the edge. So with our last pick in the second round, we took Yam Madar, who is an Israeli basketball player. And this is a draft and stash. The guy's, a point guard with some shifty moves, nice ball handling skills. Who knows if he's ever going to be anything, but I'm actually fine. I'm fine with this pick because I assumed that Danny would draft and stash one player. Madar wasn't the guy I wasn't thinking of. I was thinking he would go after Balmaro or Theo Maladon, but we did get one guy that we can basically stick overseas like we've done before with players who never work out, and just pretend like someday he's going to come over here and it's going to work out, like Yabusele. And we'll see. You can just forget about him for now because he probably will never become anything, but who knows? There's always that small possibility. So that was our draft. Most people found it to be very underwhelming. I was a mixed bag. I started off very excited from getting Nesmith, and then my excitement just went down and down and down and down. And then I guess my overall feeling at the end of the day is maybe like a B- would be an overall grade I could give the draft. But again, you just never know. It's just been frustrating because I felt like the same stuff happened last year where there were guys I really wanted that I thought were really good value, and we just couldn't quite get there. To watch PJ Washington and Tyler Hero come off the boards, the two picks before the Celtics last year, and then take Romeo Langford, who's just always hurt and hasn't shown the ability to do anything except for compete defensively in the NBA, is crushing. And then for us to do all those weird trades to get Grant Williams, who's like 4.5 feet tall and can't jump, where Brendan Clark was still there, who's already proven to be a nice little NBA player. It's been 2 years of just kind of frustrating non-moves, things not panning out. And it felt a little bit like that during this draft as well. But don't worry, because things get worse. So this morning, obviously the Gordon Hayward saga has been going on and on and on. Most people, it's been a wild ride. Like at the start of the offseason, most people were thinking, of course, Gordon Hayward's going to come back. Why would he opt out of a $34 million contract? He's not going to get more than that anywhere else. He's been hurt for 3 straight years. He has no value. And then as the offseason went on, there were rumblings about, well, actually, he does have value. People are willing to take a swing on this guy because there just isn't much out there. So then when he finally decided to opt out, I guess it wasn't a shock. But even at that point, most fans and pundits agreed that what they were trying to do was work a sign and trade, with Hayward's preferred destination being Indiana, his home state. And, the returns that were floated were not that exciting. Miles Turner and Doug McDermott was a package that was mentioned often. McDermott is a guy who can shoot and do nothing else. And Turner is a guy who, there's a lot of diverse opinions on Miles Turner. People seem to think that he is this great young center, or that he's completely worthless. Like, there's a lot of thoughts on both ends of those spectrums. And I think he's somewhere in the middle. I don't think he's a very valuable piece. I don't think that he's more than marginally better than Daniel Tice, if that. I don't think that Robert Williams can't become a more valuable player than him. Not that he is right now. He definitely is not right now, but I think there is that potential. But still, I would rather have Miles Turner and Doug McDermott than nothing, which is what we are now left with. Apparently this morning, the Charlotte Hornets have offered a 4-year, $120 million deal to Gordon Hayward. And I'm just, I'm shocked. I'm baffled. I'm bummed. Nothing about this makes sense to me. And I actually think it's bad for everyone. I think it's bad for literally everyone involved. So it's obviously bad for the Celtics, as they've lost Gordon Hayward for nothing. It's bad for Danny Ainge, because while he's never going to get fired, he could literally be running children over in the streets and his job's going to be safe with the Celtics. It's an awful offseason for him. He wasn't able to do anything with the picks. He wasn't able to do anything with Hayward. And yeah, he didn't make the mistake of overpaying Hayward or anything like that, but you can't justify him doing a good job by saying that he didn't do a worse job. Like, he's whiffed on everything this offseason. And what the Celtics are left with now is the core of their team that they had last year, but with no Hayward and with not that many promising rookies, even though we've had 6 picks over the last 2 years, and no future assets. I think we've got a handful of worthless second rounders. So it's not pretty. It's not pretty when you start to look at our future path to greatness. It's a loss for the Charlotte Hornets, who God knows what they're doing over there. But to give Gordon Hayward essentially a max contract, 4 years, $30 million a year, is insane. That's the same contract that we gave him when he came over here 3 years ago, when he was coming off of basically being an all-star in Utah. He was younger. I think he was 28. He was a borderline all-star, and that contract made sense. Now, for the last 3 years, Gordon Hayward has played, I don't know, maybe 30 games where he's looked like a good player. And other than that, he's been hurt. He's been rehabbing. He's been on the floor looking like crap. He's been hurt again. And yet somehow, Charlotte thinks, okay, let's give this guy $120 million over 4 years. A guy who hasn't been able to stay on the court, a guy who is older now, who is never going to be the player he was. It's shocking. It's absolutely shocking. There is no defense for paying him that much money. None. Zero. There is no defense for what Charlotte is trying to do. They are a young team that stinks, and now they're going to be a young team that stinks with Gordon Hayward's albatross contract. So best case scenario, Gordon I don't think there is a best case scenario. Best case scenario, Gordon returns to health. He's a decent player like he was at times for us last year. And then what? Charlotte is an 8 seed in the East, maybe. So now they're good enough to not be good. They're good enough to be mediocre, which means they're not going to get any more good draft picks. Like, with the next 2 drafts basically being assumed to be these fantastic drafts filled with franchise-changing young players, and they want to overpay a guy so they can move into mediocrity forever. Like, that's not where you want to be. In the NBA, you want to be either like borderline competing or you want to be awful. You don't want to be stuck in the middle, because when you're stuck in the middle, that's the hardest place to improve from. So Charlotte looks bad. The Celtics look bad. Gordon Hayward looks bad. What are you doing, Gordon? So now you want to go to Indy. You want to go to Indy. It's your hometown. Totally makes sense. Instead, you go to Charlotte. You're going to go play basketball in Charlotte. So the only thing I can think of, which I saw somebody commented, was that, oh, no, it's a great decision for Hayward. He gets paid way too much money that he doesn't deserve, and he's never going to be in the playoffs, so he gets more vacation, so he's getting paid more for doing less. Yeah, sure, that's great, but it's not great for your reputation. Like, Gordon Hayward officially does not matter anymore and will never matter again. But great, he's going to have all the money in the world to put his kids into the best schools in Charlotte. It looks bad for Jordan. I mean, Jordan is the best player ever, and he's also one of the worst GMs of all time. He's never made a good move. I don't think he's ever made even a remotely good move. And this just adds on to the fact that it's so weird that a guy who is like defines success in basketball can have no idea how to build a team. None. Zero. I'm 100% confident that I could run a team better than Michael Jordan. It's shocking how bad his decisions are. And so I guess I shouldn't be that surprised in a way that he would do something like this, because this is the guy that drafted Kwame. This is the guy who just signed off on thinking LaMelo, who's kind of like a worse version of his brother who hasn't been successful in the NBA, was a good idea. You can go on down the line with some of the decisions that he's made. So bad for Charlotte, bad for Boston, bad for Gordon's reputation, bad for Michael Jordan's reputation. It's just a bummer. And now the Celtics are, I don't know. I was just talking about how you don't want to be mediocre. You want to either be borderline competing or awful. And what I worry about right now as a Celtics fan is that we're in between mediocre and borderline championship. And I'm worrying that the road to mediocrity is starting to feel more feasible than the road to a championship. Now, I've said over and over and over again that I don't agree with Danny Ainge on our timeline. He seems to think our timeline is now. I seem to think that the timeline is more 2 to 3 to 4 years from now, when Tatum hopefully has ascended into superstar status. Well, our timeline is definitely not now. So maybe Danny agrees with me. The concern is that we don't have any future assets. So all of our draft picks that we had been hoarding for years are gone. And I don't think that there's that much to show for them. And, you know, we're just not a free agent destination. I know we signed Kemba and we signed Gordon, and Horford. But other than that, you know, the previous 10, 20, 30 years have not been kind. People don't want to come play in Boston. It's cold. The tax situation is not great. The fans are violently emotional. So I'm looking at this team and I'm wondering, how are we going to get there? Because obviously we're still following in the footsteps of Tatum and Brown. Tatum, if he can ascend into a superstar player, that's our best chance. Brown, if he can ascend into a star player, that is our best chance. But what are the pieces that you're going to put around these guys in order to field a championship team? Because right now, we don't have those pieces. I'm sorry, but Kemba Walker with his bum knee and his inability to play defense in the playoffs is not going to lead us there. He is not the piece that we need to compete for a championship. And I love Marcus Smart. He is definitely a part of a championship team, but he's not enough either. So now you start to think, where are these other pieces going to come from? And the reality is, I don't know. I don't know. Because we're putting a lot of stock in hoping that Robert Williams develops into a better player than Miles Turner, hoping that he can stay healthy, hoping that Romeo Langford can stay healthy, hoping that Romeo Langford can remember that at one point in his life, he was a great offensive option. He knew how to score the basketball, hoping that Nesmith stress fracture in his foot was just a blip and that he can become the player that we're really hoping for. And a lot of hoping. And if these things don't work out, then I don't know. I don't know why. I feel like the Celtics are looking at being, a 5 seed, a 6 seed, or a 4 seed for the next 2 or 3 or 4 years, unless we can find a way to make things happen. And all the rumblings I've heard from free agents that we're looking at is just, I don't even want to talk about it, honestly. Like Paul Millsap was the name that was coming up this morning. Like, no, I refuse to talk about it. So that's it. Gordon Hayward gets incredibly overpaid for no good reason at all. Charlotte continues to prove that they're absolutely incompetent and have no idea how to build a basketball team. Gordon proves that the only thing that matters in life is money. Nothing else matters other than money. Danny Ainge proves that nobody wants to deal with him and that he doesn't even know how to deal with himself, and he's just sitting on his hands. And the Celtics, every other team around the league making moves, and the Celtics just slowly crumbling into the sea like a castle made of sand. That's it. Don't kill yourself. Things might get better. Who knows? And I'll see you next time on Rants and Reviews.